We are on recording.
Okay, thanks, Bill. So everyone, welcome to the November office hours. It's a little bit earlier than we normally do them in November, but it looks like we have a good number of people on the call already. It's moved forward because of Thanksgiving in the US next week. We are going to be looking at how to get some value out of the metrics that the gateway gets. You know, the gateway is a key place for all your traffic, so the metrics around that are often very important. And we've asked Gary and Ping today, who are from the Layer7 field team, to look at ways of doing that and how we can get that into some of the external tools that are out there that might bring value rather than you running Policy Manager or something else. So hopefully it'll be useful. As always, these sessions are supposed to be interactive. So if you've got questions, that's great. Call out, ask the question. If you've got comments and you want to share your own experiences, again, we'd love to hear them as well. So with that, I'll hand over to Gary and Ping, and we'll speak later. Thanks.
Thanks, Aaron. So today, Ping and I are going to take a look at off-boxing logs, audits, and service metrics from the gateway. We'll go into exactly what we mean by those different categories. I'm going to cover the container gateway, and Ping is going to cover the OVA appliance/software gateway. And we'll kind of go through a few slides to set some of the context, and then we'll go into some demos. We'll show you how to configure the various parts, and probably the most important thing of this presentation or of what we'll be showing is that you can do this whether you're running a container gateway in Kubernetes or whether you're running the OVA appliance gateway on-prem. So if you're thinking about moving some of your infrastructure from on-prem into Kubernetes, or you're just doing some kind of a POC, or you're looking at moving your entire gateway estate over, then you can do similar things across the different platforms. So as always, this session is meant to be interactive. So if you do have questions, feel free to interject throughout, and we'll try and answer them during the session. So in terms of the container gateway, we're going to take a look at the background metrics processing task. Just a bit more about that. It's configured in policy, so it's platform agnostic from a gateway perspective. There are examples included on GitHub and on the Helm charts. That one you may be familiar with already. It includes sending gateway service metrics to InfluxDB, which is a time series database, and then we visualize those in Grafana. And as mentioned, it extends to all form factors. We'll also take a look at Splunk Connect for Kubernetes. So this is going to allow us to get all of the logs from Gateway and everything else in our Kubernetes environments over to Splunk. It's kind of a Splunk forwarder. We'll go into that as well. And we'll also take a look at the auditing policy. I'm going to introduce one way to do this, and then Ping's going to introduce another way to achieve the same through different mechanisms that we can use in Splunk. So most of you on the call will be familiar with this dashboard. This is the Gateway dashboard. As of Gateway 9.4, though, we have the ability to export these dashboard metrics to an external system, and that's what we'll be covering with the background metrics processing task. So the process from a container perspective is going to be it's going to look something like this. And you'll see later on from an OVA perspective, it's going to be much the same with a couple of slight differences that Ping will cover off in more detail. So in this example, we've got three environments in our demo today. We've only got one, but it would apply so this would apply to the three environments as well. We've got logs, and so we've got logs going to standard out. That's going to get picked up by Splunk Connect for Kubernetes. So if we're looking on the left hand of the diagram here, we then got service metrics and audits. In the demo that we have that's currently on GitHub and on the Helm charts, service metrics go to InfluxDB and they get visualized in Grafana, and that's what we can see on the top right here. Is those metrics in Grafana. It's a nice dashboard, but we thought it's probably better to have, I guess, a more popular tool like Splunk showing a similar view. So through the HTTP event collector on Splunk, we can send the service metrics to Splunk, and we can also send the audit to Splunk. So I'll show you what those different policies do and how we can configure them. So the background metrics processing task. So we saw in the dashboard, you get a fair amount of information that's quite useful if you're looking at like the front-end latency, the back-end latency of a service, whether or not it's been successful or failed, if there's policy violations, if the routing has worked out as expected, and so on. This JSON payload here is just a quick representation of all of the information that you're going to get from that. We'll go into Policy Manager and we'll take a look at this policy as well. But basically, the background metrics processing task is going to get populated with an input called metrics, and that's going to happen automatically. So there's nothing additional that you need to do for that. All you've got to do is put it into a format that your external log aggregator is going to understand, and you can send it across. So as mentioned, I'll cover one way, which is going to be sending it to the Splunk the Splunk event collector, and Ping will cover another way. So Splunk Connect with Kubernetes is going to be available from Splunk, and you can access that through this link here when the deck is shared. It's installed via Helm chart, and it contains three different components. The first is Kubernetes logging. That's what we're going to be using today. It also has Kubernetes objects. So that's all of the, I guess, definitions of all of the objects that you have in Kubernetes. And it also has metrics. So real-time metrics of what's actually happening from a runtime perspective in that Kubernetes cluster. But as mentioned, we're going to be focusing on Kubernetes logging for the session today. They also have support on a variety of external vendors. So it's relatively easy to get up and running with the Helm chart that they have, and from Splunk themselves, it's something that they are going to support in most cases. So what we also wanted to do is take some information from the audit sync policy. So as we all know, writing to the audit database is not a good idea in any production environment. And so we set up audit sync policies to send those metrics, which we may find useful to external systems. And in this case, we're going to be using the event collector from Splunk again to send the audit details across as well. And we'll take a look at how this is configured as well. But basically, it's going to work the same as any audit sync that you would have configured in the past. Oh, sorry. So that's going to be Ping's slide. So from that, what I'll do is quickly head into Policy Manager, and we'll take a look at the background metrics processing task and how to configure that. And I wonder if that's big enough for everyone to see.
Can you show if it is possible to add stuff to the message, like extra, like the API key, or some information of who has been calling and things like that?
Yeah, so that's something that I think Ping will touch on when he runs through his session. I guess if you wanted to do that, the most standard way of doing that would be making use of what the portal does. In the way that it works, so it has so you have information collection at message received, and you have information collection at message completed. So you take shared variables and you use them throughout policy, and then you can send that to a backend of your choice.
Right. So extending on that, right? This is to do with the portal component where you are then be exposed to more information about the request, because a lot of the information is, for example, client information is stored and it's managed by the portal, right? So portal in runtime, when we enable a service that's governed by portal, you get the exposure to additional data points that you could look up over a runtime, and these information then could be gathered and sent off box to any medium that you have in aggregating and then processing these events. So certainly doable. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I was just saying if you're gonna cover it in your session, I will just let
Brief.
Gary.
Yes, I will. Yes, yeah. I will point it out in my on the VM side, the client side, which I've sort of done that in the past. So
cool.
I'll get to that certainly for today's session.
Thanks very much, because I have a customer who asked exactly that. You know, they saw these these background event, and they were asking, well, how do I know who has called that service? You know, like app-wise, if there was a way of grabbing that information and putting it in there.
Right. Well, we have
Yeah,
multiple ways to gather the metrics, right? So we'll definitely highlight on some of that. But to name a few, right? You probably are aware of the traffic logger. That's one you could where you could set up to gather metrics. There's another way, which is the service metrics, which is run by or backed by a policy-backed policy to gather the metrics and for you to formulate the type of metrics you get. And lastly, of course, the manual way of writing and sending it directly from the gateway through policy. So multiple ways
yeah,
to
exactly.
do the same thing. Yes.
Yeah, but they were using that one that event, the one that you're showing.
Oh, the
Yeah,
service
the service
event.
metrics
Okay.
event. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
for
they just
this particular one, what we know is that as part of the product design on it, your exposure to it, it's limited to scope. I think largely by what's being passed into and available in this policy, which is the metrics.
exactly. There is only the metrics, which is a message, and I don't know where the metrics is being created, but and if there is a way of injecting something in that message that adds to this.
Yeah,
But
so
I guess there is.
based on the variable, it's what we share on the document and what Gary has shown on screen here. There's a limited set of variables that's being exposed. I know
Exactly.
that you could also get other system, I think maybe a very small set of system variables from that, but that's pretty much all you would have. And so in a way, we may have to look at how you can tie these variables together. Meaning you have to send what you have in the metrics, the information that's exposed here. And then if you want additional information, you might have sent through a service policy separately. And then you can kind of combine them together.
Yeah, because I thought that because it's a background metrics processing task, it's not linked to the actual processing of the service. So it doesn't, it's not aware of the transport, let's say transport layer variables that normally would be.
Yeah, I imagine it's because of a different processing thread it uses.
Exactly.
So therefore there's a disconnect from there. So if you were talking about the request ID, which that might not be giving you the link of the two. And so
exactly.
we might have to work with the time as well as the definition in it for the service. So for example, service ID and a particular time and anything that we can gather to formulate, this uniqueness where you can kind of somewhat correlate the information, but not something that's definite you could piece together, I guess.
Cool, thanks.
Yeah.
Sorry for the interruption.
No problem at all. The conversation's always good. So on to the background metrics processing task, and yeah, to your point, Maurizio, and Ping, the information is fairly limited, but I guess from a metrics perspective, it's really to show what's happening from a traffic perspective, and it's the same information that you get on this gateway dashboard. So this as well doesn't have necessarily information about which requesting client comes in, or any real detailed information. So it's more about how is my service performing? How is what's my front end latency like? What's my back end latency like? Do I have any requests failing going to a back end service and so on? So it's more of a quick view of some of the runtime metrics that are going on the gateway, and then obviously you can extend the amount of information that you're getting, but it wouldn't be through this channel though. It would be through a different one. So as I mentioned, so this background metrics processing task, if we take a look at the policy properties, it's a policy-backed service operation policy fragment. It's got a particular policy tag type, which is, I won't read the first part, but it ends in service metrics processor. And this is configured through tasks, extensions, and add-ons, and managing policy-backed services. So you would just create one here, you would select the type, and then you would select the backing policy. So the name of this policy is InfluxDB. That doesn't mean that it's something related to InfluxDB. That's just the name of the actual policy itself. So I took this directly from the example that we have in our gateway Helm chart, and so I just extended this as part of the example. So the first part of this is getting the message ready to send to InfluxDB. This environment is connected to InfluxDB as well as Splunk, just so we can see both examples working as expected. In this, we are doing some JSON path expressions to get everything out of the message. Something else that we've got in the InfluxDB example is something that accumulates the data in memory so that you don't have too many requests going from your gateway to your external log platform or your external log aggregator. I don't have the same configured here, but I mean, in a production environment, you would either have something similar here where you've got some kind of a failback and some kind of a fallback if something goes wrong, and so that you're not tying up the network with too many requests outbound. This request runs every single time a request comes into the gateway. And that's why I mentioned that, so that you can be aware of the fact that if you have a really big service running in here, then that's going to potentially impact the performance of the gateway. So it makes sense to accumulate this in memory first. And Ping will also mention a different way of how to get those metrics into the external system. So for this, we're just taking the metrics.main part, which is just that JSON message that gets populated by the service, and we're sending that directly to Splunk. And we'll see that in Splunk shortly. From an audit sync perspective, so I also mentioned that we'd take a look at this. I've got some stuff that's transposing or converting the XML audit record into JSON. With this, there's also another way to do this, but for the purposes of this, I'm just sending this through on the services collector endpoint for Splunk, and it'll go directly in there. So I guess the first thing we should show is the Grafana dashboard. So this is part of the initial demo that we have, and this is available on the Gateway Helm charts to enable. It's also available on GitHub as an example of how to use the background metrics processing task. So it has some of the policy that we just looked at now, and it does serve as a good starting point if you'd like to see a working demo really quickly. And obviously, because it is all based on policy, you can customize that as much as you need to. But out of the box, you do get quite a nice dashboard. There's information about the different services that are coming in. You can filter it based on the published service, environment, and the various gateway nodes, and so on. So, but one of the problems with this is that not everyone uses Grafana. Not everyone has InfluxDB as a standard in the enterprise, and so a more popular tool is going to be Splunk. So Splunk is quite widely deployed throughout our customer base, and so it served as a good example point to have something to show that we can do this. So the first three panels here are all of the service metrics coming in. So this is taking the JSON payload from the background metrics processing task, and we're getting a quick view of success, failure, and policy violations. We can see requests by service, so how many requests are coming in through each service, and what are our front end and back end latencies like. Something else that's quite important to note here is that we've got two environments that are currently writing metrics to the background metrics that are currently writing to Splunk. So we've got Gateway 1, which is an OVA gateway that Ping has running, and Gateway 5 is running in Kubernetes. So I can have both, I guess, on-prem, and I can have Kubernetes writing into the same environment, and I can get a high-level view of exactly what's going on throughout my gateway estate. So what we've also got in this environment, as mentioned, is the logs. So the logs are getting pulled from the Splunk Connect for Kubernetes plugin. That is FluentD. That's picking up the logs for Gateway, and it's also picking up the logs for anything else that's running in my Kubernetes cluster at the moment. But I've just got a filter that's pulling up the Gateway log. And I've also got the audit sync, so I'm getting some contextual information about what's happening from an audit perspective. What I can do here as well is because I've got the audit log, I've got a request ID for my audits. So I can click on my request ID, it'll open up a new search, and I can see all of the logs that are associated with that particular request. So request into RESTman and authentication failed, and then all of the different paths that go along with that. So with that, I guess I've shown a very simple way on how we can enable that background metrics processing, that background service metrics processing task, a very simple dashboard in Splunk. And with that, I'll hand over to Ping to talk about the OVA gateway and also some more advanced use cases.
Thanks, Gary. Do you mind bring up the slide deck, the slide on your screen for that part?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, thanks for that.
Yeah, helping this is Durga from Ameribridge.
Hey, Durga, how are you?
Yeah, hi. So the one what we are showing, like in our environment, we are using Sumo Logic as our logging tool. So in our use case, in our container environment, okay, we are pushing everything to std out, okay, including audit logs and our custom logs. But I didn't find an option to way to push the traffic logs. In our OVA world, we are using our traffic logs to using our service metrics. But I didn't find a way to analyze the traffic logs in our container use cases. Is something that can be done to the containers too?
So with the container, I believe they've all go through one log file. The SSG logs, we saw that during the setup of our demo. You won't be able to kind of create a separate log file or set up a separate log to capture that information and have that stored separately. So this may be rely on the fact that you have to use the log shipper or the event shipper, however you want to segregate that information before you went and storing it. So I know that in the past I might have worked with I worked with the Elk stack in the past, and at the time I was using Logstash to do the processing of those information and have them store in a particular way before it gets to the destination for dashboarding and whatnot. So I imagine you have to do something similar. You would have to have the medium that's transporting these events to also sort it out for you.
Right, as long as we are able to push everything to std out log on the container, right? So we have the mechanism to separate out the based on the some identifier, example, for audit assertion we have the different package name, and for other thing we have the different package name. But where we do have the traffic as a different package name in our Appress gateway, such a way we are articulating how many requests are hitting to the server, and we are added some of the cluster-wide properties so that we are adding a few other things like response time and request body, response body. In the one log line, we can accumulate most of the information, so that will give the high-level overview of service success, response times, and request bodies, response bodies, everything. Okay, so such a way, if we can something can be pulled from our std out log.
Just so you would have to generate your own events in order to gather more than what we offer out of out of the box, right? Because if you look at out of the box, just what Gary just demonstrated on the service metrics, you're limited to a set of information that's given to you. But sounds to me you are asking for more information, and that might be something you need to explicitly set on your service policies to do that. Now, where to set it, you can do that on the global message complete policy, right? Or you can do it on the individual runtime policy where you're sending the audits or through the log file. So anything that you send as through the assertion at audit details, you can specify that these will be sent out as log files, right, as part of log events, and then on the SSG logs that you capture them. So that should be showing up on and you'll be able to capture them through the HTTP. You said HTTP out, right? So do you?
It is STD out. It's like a general container STD out, right? Yes,
Okay.
I do agree
Yeah.
that
So then in that case, you get them. Yeah.
Yeah. I can see all the logs are including audit logs also automatically pushing to the STD out.
Yeah.
And also in our OVA environment, right? We have the capability on the task, right, on the audit sync policies, where we can disable or enable the audit logs. Okay, if you are unchecking the box on the not to push logs into the audit database or somewhere, okay, it's like not pushing anything. But in our case, like in the container environment, if you want to disable the audit log, looks like there is not a way, a direct way to, unless we are changing in the policy level.
Yes, correct. Because everything goes standard out, right, from what you've introduced on the gateway. So anything that you're auditing, or unless you have policy logics to suppress that, meaning you do not choose not to run these audits unless it hits a certain threshold, perhaps.
Okay, so our like in our use case, we are using the audit log for like very granular level of the debugging. We are not enabling by default in the production environment or QA environment. Okay. So that in this case, what happening is automatically pushing all the logs into STD out. So is any way that we can control not to push any audit logs into the STD out?
If it's an audit, then I believe the audit level. Have you explored that? The threshold?
Threshold.
It's in your cluster-wide properties. I think it's audit detail threshold. And there's an audit message threshold as well as the audit admin threshold. So audit, they came into three categories, right? You have the admin audits, you have the message audit, and you have the detail audits. They all have a threshold on level where then to determine what gets audited. So it's a threshold level that you can choose from. I believe there's the info level, there is the warning level, and there's a severe level. And that's the threshold configuration you can set to suppress any audits if you choose not to have them recorded. So for example, if you have some audits that's on the info level, if you were to set the cluster-wide properties for the message, let's say if this is a message audit, you set the threshold to warning, then anything only on the warning level or the severe level gets audited. Anything on the info level does not. So you can use that to do the filtering based on the audit level that you.
Yeah. But in that case, during the migration, we have to do a lot of policy level changes, right, to adopt this feature.
Well, it's if you have something that's existing that have not factored into and categorize the level of audits each of your event that you're generating on the gateway, then yes, you need to do that. But if you were conscious about the type of the audit level that you generate for each audit, then simply just by introducing the cluster properties and mark it accordingly to your desired threshold, then everything should work perfectly and to the effect that you wanted it. So it depends. It really depends on how we have created these audits, right? So what I mean by that is, if you have not factored that in mind about your threshold level and you create all your audit events as info level, whether it's severe or not, then having a linear categorization of these events, there's no way to sort them out using the levels. So it's a matter of how you have done for your existing environment to determine how much work you need to do to make use of this audit event level thresholds.
Okay, for the point of interest, let's continue with our session. Yeah, definitely I will reach out to you more on that one.
Sounds good. So with the OVA software gateway, very much similar to what Gary has. The whole idea is just being consistent, right, with our implementation, and VM is no different from that. VM in a way, it allow us to send Splunk to send our logs and events through a HTTP event collector. That's something it's done on a HTTP level where you're sending off these events. But we have another way which it's pretty much used quite for a long time, which is to aggregate or to ingest our log files and have that sent off. And for Splunk, in our case, we'll use the Splunk forwarder. So it's the universal Splunk forwarder that we use for that. And of course, you can use multiple other agents that you can install on our gateway. So FluentD might be one of them. Logstash, that might be something else that you can install and have that to transport your log events and have them off box. So, and of course, also do some processing within it. And the idea is that the best way to do that is each event that's come in, you should just treat it and format it. But I wouldn't suggest you to kind of aggregate a bunch of events and send it off, right? Because what you end up happening is your timing on those events, because when you're aggregating, you lose some of that information when you get transported, or when you gather information together in I guess packages or in bundles. It's harder to kind of deal them as per events that gets triggered and sent off. So it's
sorry. Isn't it a good idea still to use the syslog, facility within the gateway when you come into the application, the appliance gateways via UDP 53 or something, or would that not be?
This is something we talk quite a bit with our customers in terms of how do we transport our log events out, right? So yes, UDP is one way you can do that, right? TCP is another. It's depends on how important these log events are to you, right? So you can categorize them, right? If something that's important, right? UDP you cannot rely on UDP on that, and these important events, I wouldn't imagine that you would have. You would be bombarded with them throughout.
Yeah. Well, we could go TCP then. That shouldn't be a problem.
Right.
But you've got that ability just to set that up in the log syncs.
Correct. You could do that as well.
Okay.
So multiple ways to do that, right? So with Splunk, I know that's the way customer has it is they would have a Splunk central dashboard or central admin server. And what they do is they deploy it. They deploy the agents from there to the server versus us you putting the actual agent on the machine itself. So there's multiple ways why they might choose one way or another. For control purpose and for support purpose, right? They might choose to, hey, you know what? We have a enterprise support for Splunk resource that we do it this way. So yeah, other ways to do that. But yeah, UDP. One of the key thing is that it doesn't guarantee transport, right? But this is just like I'll send everything out and forget. So it's all about how important that is. But for sure, UDP it's a lot more efficient compared to TCP.
For performance reasons, yeah.
Yes, correct.
There's another thing that I wanted to say to Vince. I did come across a customer that Gary knows very, very, very well. Because he was there, and what they had an issue with is that their logs, while in their case they were using a syslog server, it was full, and what ended up happening is that if you use the log sync functionality to directly put it there, you could end up slowing completely down the machine, the gateway, because it's waiting for space to write down before it goes to the next thread. While if you have the Splunk forwarded, you are kind of removing that the delay, because the gateway will write to file, which it can do, no worries, and then the Splunk forwarder daemon would just read from the file when it has time to put it. So you're not,
Okay.
you know,
At William Hill, we had about 30-minute to 1 hour delay in Splunk, and that didn't affect the gateways. So it might just be that situation you were in.
yeah,
But
maybe it was
William
the
Hill didn't
syslog
have that
part.
problem.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think it was related to syslog more than Splunk.
Correct. So
Yeah, that's
with
right.
Anyway.
with with a Splunk forwarder, right? The thing is a separate process from the gateway. Right? So gateway writes it into a local destination. You can have Splunk forwarder just picks it up from there. So you don't have to worry about, well, what happens when, let's say, the gateway itself is not stable. Let's say this is the one thing if you want to send audits, right? It's able to write the audit events before it crashes or whatnot. At least you have Splunk being able to transport some of that information out.
But then surely you have some disk I/O that you have to contend with then?
Yes, so definitely, for sure.
So when you're talking about 20,000 requests per second coming through a set of loads of gateways, then you've got a lot of disk I/O going on.
Correct. And so really the desired result or way to go about sending them off is through the HTTP event collector, right? So
Okay, yeah.
just transport right away. That's sort of why, in Kubernetes and in container technology, that's sort of the go forward path. But, we have customers who might just still are using logs files to do that, right? Because they want to ensure that the logs itself at least is persistent on the system. They could always retrieve it, right? So it's not to say you have to go for one way or another. It's just it depends on your requirement within the enterprise. What's best, right? And even syslog, right? Some customers say, well, we have to use syslog because this is the way how we've been doing it, and all logs need to go through syslog. And those, right, you can't really push for any other ways to transport them out. It might have to be, these syslog events need to be examined before going out. So syslog is the medium that they do that in. So that said, so transport there's multiple ways to do it, and I think there's no one perfect way to do that or no one desired way. We leave it open to the implementer choose the best they could. So apart from that, what you see on the right here is two dashboards. You're pretty familiar with the dashboard at the bottom that says the Layer7 API gateway. This I'm going to demonstrate to you, but what it reflects on is the dashboard for my local environment, the demo environment I have with the gateway, the single gateway. What you saw on the previous dashboard or the dashboard that Gary put together, think of it this way, right? In an enterprise, and actually maybe I'll just share with you on my screen here. That way you could you get to see what I'm referring to here. So this is my local dashboard. You can see the service that's residing on my Layer7 gateway dashboard are service 1, 2, 3, and 4. Pretty much very similar to what Gary has on his dashboard, but what it is this is a localized environment. So think of it this way: you have an organization that has multiple groups, right? You might be part of the organization that just managed this particular gateway cluster. What you then do is you create a dashboard that just represent that cluster that you're managing to understand the health. And of course, the enterprise requires a overall view of all your gateways. So not just your cluster, but across the different groups. In that case, you would have another dashboard. You leveraging the same set of log data or information, and you could build a dashboard that shows to reflect all of that, right? So in this case, you can see here, we have the service 1, 2, 3, and 4, as well as other services that's it's captured. So standardizing the logs, right, that information is very important because you can dissect them and you could aggregate them together to give you the desirable effect you want based on the different tiers, right? If you want to kind of group them together in any ways to give you the overall view. So that's really a great thing about having you and your ability to manage these audits yourself and these logs information yourself. Okay. So let me just kind of also show you here how it's implemented. So you know the typical dashboard that we have here, and second here. And I have these services that I run. So service 1, I'm going to send a few requests in. Service 2, send a few requests. 3, as well as 4. And what you would see, it start to generate these information that you're familiar with. There is like policy violation ones, routing failures, and success calls, and how many calls in total, right? And this is what I use to kind of gather that information. It's being off box and managed by and processed by the custom metrics gathering policy. Very similar to what it's actually a copy of what Gary put together. And what you see here is I've disabled some of the things. So for example, data accumulation in buffer. Don't quite need that in my setup because Splunk is able to kind of take the events and write it line by line, event by event onto and have them shipped out. So the Splunk folder, in a way, it listens to these log files that you add to it, and you add to it to monitor. And whenever there's new events, it's gonna push them off to the Splunk server. So what I did to support that using this policy back service or policy is that there's an additional line I added called add audit details. If you look at that, I am sending that information. And with Splunk, the biggest thing is they like key pair values if you're sending it as log events. Okay, I put it into a custom filter. Service metrics is that's where the Splunk folder is monitoring to pull that information and ship that to Splunk. And I'm also sending that to the server Gary has, the Splunk server, the event collector. So you can see that it's sending to 2 locations at once. And this is how you get the desired effect of having metrics being here on one Splunk server as well as on the other. Okay. Now, I also want to point one thing out that I sort of briefly talked about when Rachel brought up. It's how do we decorate that? How do we add more messaging to it, right? Another example I put together in the past, some of the engagement is this particular dashboard that I put together, and it's called the Gateway Runtime Stats. I do have an article that I post here. You go to our API Academy. There's a post I call the Enriching and Externalizing Gateway Metrics to Splunk. And this kind of give you a how-to and overview of ways you can go about doing that. It's a little bit dated because it doesn't cover container gateways, but largely the concept is very much similar. In my case, I'm just sharing that what it would be, how you would do that in Splunk. And of course, what kind of dashboarding would you would get and how you can create and capture these additional informations. But the end result you will have is something like that. Okay, so I don't have any new data on it, so I'm using data set between sometimes when I publish the document or the article on API Academy. So what you can do is you could you can build multiple visuals to meet your need in terms of what you want to see in terms of the data sets. You can do some sort of drop-down interactions, right, to choose the type of gateways that you want to filter it to. You can also choose the API, list of APIs you want to kind of do additional filter, okay? And what you can see here is these are pretty much generic information you get, your success request, your error request, right? And you can extend that by the determined percentage, right? Percentage is very important, as you know, right? If you want to determine issues, you want to know what percentage the error occurred contributes to, right? And that's where you can kind of determine the severity of some of the underlying issues on the runtimes. So you get the volume, so gives you the transaction of how many TPS that you have or transaction per given time. And underneath here, gateway latency. I really like to kind of illustrate that because a lot of the time the gateway becomes the main point of concern by anybody when there's issues in their environment. Is why are we getting service interruptions and whatnot? And first, they would always point to the gateway because everything goes through the gateway. And so what you want to do is the latency will give you a quick idea where things might be. So what I have introduced, not only the backend routing, the total time, but I also include authentication time. So one use case or one incident we had was there was a high latency in one of the customers' environment, and we didn't know what was the cause to it, but we later identified that it was one of the LDAP that they're using for the service that introduced all the high latency to it. But if we were to, in ways, a lot of our service has some sort of authentication, whether it be a access token validations, a basic auth, a mutual auth, or whatnot. We could also introduce authentication time to kind of give you a good sense of how much, how much of that contribute to the overall request time. Of course, you can do several breakdown into other types of latency, right? So, for example, if you're doing routing, you can have that. If you do additional processing within it, so for example, if you're scraping information out, if you're validating the request, or if you're doing some sort of message transformation within the gateway, you could separate that out and have latency introduced for each one of those tasks within the policy. Okay. And of course, underneath you can see, you could gather additional information about the average latency, max latency. So it gives you some of the abnormal behavior. You can capture that, and of course for the routing as well. So these are some of the metrics and some of the key indicator I like to express in the dashboard. These all kind of contribute to understanding the health of your gateways and the running services that it's processing.
Sorry to jump in again. Talking about health, what about JMX metrics? Being able to see concurrency, threads, heap, garbage collection. We used to be able to look at all that with APM and Wiley, with William Hill, and then William Hill decided to move away from that and go to Carlos. What was that? Where you've gone to? You've gone to something else now. New Relic. That's it. But now they're going to AWS and EKS gateways. Basically, need to be able to try and get that information, and I don't know how to do it.
So several ways, right? APM, the built-in, the quickest way you could gather all that information.
So actually use the APM the plugin itself.
Yes.
But you haven't got APM on the back end. That's not licensed anymore.
I see. Well, there's several ways, and I wasn't planning to kind of show that, but
No, you don't have to show it. Just even if you mention it, we can take it offline.
Yeah, no, because the JVM, because you do have access to the what customer did was they written scripts, right? Shell scripts to look into the JVM, right, themselves and pull that information. Those are readily available, right? And that can you can run that as a cron script, right? That runs every minute and pull the commands and pull those metrics out. I'll briefly show you some of that too.
I didn't know if there was a preferred way to do it.
So
preferred way is precision API monitoring, I think APM stuff, right?
Yeah, okay, all right. I know, I guessed that. I shouldn't have said. Yeah, I should show up.
Yeah, those are the alternatives.
Vince, we should talk about that and why they did that, but we should have that conversation.
Yeah, that's the business. Remember that API management is a tiny little thing compared with the rest of the business when you're talking about William Hill. So they swung elsewhere.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. So Vince, there's also Prometheus that you could take a look at. So Prometheus from a container gateway perspective, I think we had a brief conversation about it.
I think we did.
a few months ago in August. Just looking here. Yeah, so they have a I think it's a jar file, but you can load that on. It would require mounting it to the container gateway, but in terms of that, you do get all of the JMX logs. I'm not sure how close that is to what you previously would have had, but
Yeah.
that might be something to look at.
Yeah, it's just like for performance reasons, I need to be able to know, what's the core concurrency and how are the threads building up and what's happening when you start hitting high CPU levels on the gateways and things, and that sort of information is very, very handy for tuning. All right, thank you. Sorry to interrupt again.
Not at all. Yeah, so and lastly, I think that's also very important is the request and response size. If you're able to capture that, you know how much time your gateway is spending processing some of that information if you are processing those data on the gateway. Of course, number of requests by APIs, you can get a percentage. Of course, getting the API names as well. This API informations about that I might not have introduced here, but application information, we can also introduce that into it because once you have API portal integration with our gateway, every request comes in, it's has a API key to it, which allows you to look up for additional information. So you can do a breakdown into the organization if you want, and pull information about that particular organization and the applications. So by choosing the application, you could see the breakdown of all the APIs consumed within the applications. So that's some of the additional things you do with portal integration. So it gives you that visibility and data points that you can further gather and output to Splunk. But yeah, so that's sort of summarize what I want to share in regards to the VM side of the metrics and how we do that.
Just on that, I just remembered something that might be applicable, Vince. So next month's office hours, which again will be moved a little bit further forward because of Christmas holiday, we are actually going to do I'm going to do a session on performance. Okay, so it might not get down as deep as that, but it might be a time to have that conversation. So Charles from the support organization is going to do it's a good time to advertise it now. He's going to do a session on, when customers raise questions about performance of the gateway, what do they do? What do they take customers through? What are those first steps and those kinds of things? So if we don't cover it in that, maybe, the next month or another session, we can do, a more advanced performance session, but that will be the start of that for next month's office hours, which
If you need any help with that, I've spent a lot of time doing that, and that's what people send, I get lots and lots of customers coming direct to me because I've done a lot of performance stuff.
Okay, great.
This is Greg. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Hey, I just wanted to, this may come off as a dumb question because this is kind of new to me, and I do have certain things set up for API management in terms of Splunk. We're using Universal Forwarder. Ping, if you wouldn't mind for a second going back to your policy back service and showing the audit details assertion.
Sure, I can do that.
My question, again, this may sound stupid because I may be uninformed about this, but wouldn't it be feasible to basically just take that add audit details with your key value pairs and send that to a log and then have the universal forwarder index that log and essentially avoid the policy back service altogether? And then we just deal with extrapolating the data in the Splunk dashboard after the fact.
So yes, in the link that I share with you, this is exactly what I did. I've sent directly from a service policy, not through using this policy back policy here.
And the event collector essentially is.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
But what you get from the metrics back policy is the these stats, right? So your total front time, backend latency, if you were to do it on the service level, you don't get those information, right? You have to kind of calculate that yourself, either by your ways of capturing it.
So in the audit example, you're only going to get things like
you won't know if it's a policy violation, right, or if it's routing failure. Well, you could, but you have to kind of now introduce that and find them put together instead of being available to you as a metrics variable. So
okay.
So in terms of the front end and back end latency, you would have to pass that information, or if you have to, in the way Portal does it, is it takes a timestamp before and after, right, at the beginning and at the end of the policy, and then it does a math subtractions to give you the total time, and that's how it's doing that. I think you might be able to pull some information to get that through a context variable. So, but in any ways, yeah, I don't know if it actually give you the stats, like whether it's a policy violation or being successful or not. You have to kind of do your own logics to pull that information. So yes,
Okay.
it's doable, but I sort of want to, I think that's the advantage of having you want to do additional event collecting, right? Whereas this is more pertaining to your service metrics. So, which is you also bounded to by the information you have here.
Right, and you can't just create a custom log sync package and add service metrics processor as the package and expect that to work.
Right. So it's not. It requires a bit more effort to put together. But if you have Portal, you notice that Portal leverage and built its own way of processing and pulling those informations out under the message complete for the Portal policy. And what you can do is I advise some of the customers to look at what they have there. If you want to send it off box to somewhere else, you could go ahead and leverage what's there and also have an event to send off to a log file or something else, so that you don't have to do a redundant in a similar manner of collecting your own logs and events.
Are you sharing this policy backed operation on GitHub?
I can certainly do that. Yeah, we could provide Medium for you to retrieve them.
Awesome.
There is currently a link. I'll paste that into the chat window, and I think we might add it into the presentation afterwards when we share that.
Yeah, guys, I was going to say, I think there's a couple of things you've shared and talked about. If we work with Bill to not only share the video, but share the links in that community post, this will be on the community post in a couple of days, hopefully, and you'll have those things. Greg, I was going to say at the start of that, there are no stupid questions in this call. This is supposed to be, a safe place where you can ask what you want. And I think you kind of proved it wasn't a stupid question by, the response and those kinds of things. So thanks for asking that.
Thank you.
And never apologize on this call. There's such a mixture of experience we get on this call that it really should be somewhere you can ask what you want. So yeah, I think and I would say to anybody on this, not just Greg, right? If there are things that this has triggered that you want to discuss more, feel free to reach out to your friendly Broadcom field person or services team and work with them on that. If you're struggling for that, contact the right person, then please just give me or Bill a shout, and we'll try and put you in touch with the right person. If you can't find it, the community again is a good place to ask a question, and a good place to get in contact with us. So with that, it's a little over the hour. I want to thank Gary and Ping for that. I thought it was really useful, really in depth. That's the kind of thing we're trying to do with the office hours. As I said, next month we are planning to do one on performance and some kind of level 1 and 2 performance debugging things that the support team. I asked the support team what should every customer know, and they said, hey, this is what we want to do. So they're going to take us through that session. If you've got ideas for other sessions coming up in the new year, please let us know. That would be good. And for our customers and especially our partners, if there's things you would like to show, I mean, Vince, you offered to help out with next month's session, but if there's things you think all our customers should know from a partner perspective, then I know Enable You, Apida, a couple of other partners are on this call, then we would be happy for you to take the wheel on an office hours as well. So let us know if you want to do something like that. Other than that, I will wish everybody a good day, and we will see you next month. Reach out
This
if you need
recording
anything.
should be up on communities this afternoon, at worst case tomorrow morning. Everybody have
Thanks,
a good day.
Bill. Thank you, Bill.
Thank you
Bye,
very
everyone.
much.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye bye.